Welcome to From Head to Heart and Home. We're excited to have you listen to our conversation. This is a channel created by women, empowering women to take intentional action in creating the life they want, with your hosts, Carla Center, subconscious healer, and Shanda Soretti, certified coach. We're so excited to have you all here today. And we're going to talk about some stuff that not everybody even thinks about what they're doing. It's doing instead of being. And Shanda, do you want to kind of jump in and share some insights?
Yeah. Okay. So I love, and I know you do too. So I'm really excited about what's going to flourish from this conversation today. But I love this topic so much. So, like Carla already mentioned, we are talking about being versus doing, or doing versus being. So, typically, we talked about last week how most of us live up in our heads, right? So that is what this conversation is all about, is about getting out of your head and getting down into your body. So when we're in our head, we're so focused on doing, right? So you can probably even relate to this. Your life might even feel like a ginormous revolving checklist, right? So you're constantly doing all the things. What needs to be done? What do I have to do? ABC every single day. It's like the rat race, right? So that's kind of what we're talking about today, is how to move out of the doing and move into the being. Because what happens is there's a big energetic shift when you're able to make that transition from head to heart, right? And it really revolves, for me anyway, around why we're doing what we're doing. Okay. So I work a lot with this on my clients as well. And, I'll have some clients share with me, I'm doing all the things. I don't understand why this is still happening, or why this person's acting this way. I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing everything that they want. And it's like, okay, I understand that. So, first of all, when you're doing those things, how are you being? What is the energy behind how you're showing up? So, for example, if you are a wife, okay, you have a spouse, you're a wife or your husband, you have a spouse, and you're the one who maybe makes all the meals, okay, but you don't really like doing it, but you do it because it's one of your main priorities, right? You guys split the things, and it's just one of the things that you do the majority of the time. If your energy behind doing that comes from a place of resentment, and I have to do this, and I hate doing this, that type of energy, it really comes out in the way that you do the thing. So how it comes across is not necessarily how you are intending it to, because that underlying energy around how you're being when you're doing. So I'll let Carla chime in and see if she has anything she wants to add to this, but this is super exciting.
Right. And when you do stuff when you do stuff instead of being, like, where is the love that you want to come across? You don't want to come across as angry and resentful, which is what you feel when you're doing, because this list that can get never ending, the to-do list. Um, and us ladies, because we think that we're supposed to do it all, to be the best mom, to be the best wife, to be the best daughter, the best girlfriend, the best, best everything. We make these lists of things that we have to do, and then even if we want to be this loving person, when we are doing it to do it, because this is part of our list that we have to do to make all these goals happen each day, like, this is what's going to get me to the next step. And then there is there's exhaustion, frustration, anger. So many different emotions come from that, and that's not how we want to be seen by somebody else. And then where's the connection? When we're not being, we can't make that true connection with the other people in our lives, because we're so focused on what we have to get done, what we have to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you brought up the connection piece, because it's huge, right? And it's not just connecting again with other people, it's connecting to ourselves. So for a moment, stop and ask yourself, um, when I have this feeling that I need to do something, is it something that I actually want to do? Okay. Now, hold on with me here for a second, because there are things, let's be honest, sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but there are going to be things that we don't want to do that we actually have to do, right? Like some people don't like going to the doctor, but it's one of those things that we get to do. So, first of all, is it something that you want to do? So determine that, figure that out. And you are the only person who gets to decide if it is actually something you want to do or not, right? Nobody else is in control of that unless you allow that to happen. Okay. So then the next question would be to ask yourself, if I don't genuinely want to do this, is there another way that this can get done without me doing it? Again, as moms, as women, we tend to just take all of that responsibility on when we don't want to, when we don't have the energy to, when we don't have the space to, or the capacity to. We still take that on because of societal norms and peer pressure. And we think that's what we're supposed to do, right? So the connection piece with connecting to what you want to do, and then creating a connection with your spouse or the people that you live with, to maybe create an environment where everybody kind of gets to take part in the doing, right? So that you can all focus more on the being. Does that make sense?
Right. And then when you do it, like, because you think it's expected of you, you're making those unspoken
Hmm.
agreements with other people, like, and even at your, it's not just at home, it's at your jobs. You're making that unspoken agreement with somebody, and then you don't have that conversation when you've connected with yourself. What do I want to do? You haven't had that conversation with the other people to make a real agreement with what works for you. And it quite possibly could be that the other person's willing to do it. They're willing to share the responsibility with you, but we don't know, because we've made that decision that we have to do this. We have to do this. And that's, so it saves so much. It creates so much more openness for flow in your life, because you're not just assuming that everything has to be,
Yeah.
and then you're exhausted too. I mean, because the never ending list of to-dos that you've decided you have to do.
Yeah, you brought up a really beautiful point. I have a paradigm or belief that we are always teaching people how to treat us. So if we are choosing, whether it's subconsciously or consciously choosing to be the one that's going to take all the things on, we're teaching people that we're going to do that. So people will, like, think of it like this. If you get invited out all the time, I'm just going to make up a story here, but let's say you get invited out all the time and you're very introverted, and or maybe you're just really busy and you always say no. Eventually what happens is people stop asking you to do things because they know, or they assume, you're just going to say no. So it's the same thing with responsibilities as well, and tasks and to-dos. If we're just going to be the one that takes them on, then that eventually we're just going to be the one that they get dumped on, right? So it reminds me of like you said, Carla, you said something about like negotiating with the people, with other people. You can always renegotiate too, right? You can always have that conversation. That's allowed. We're allowed to change our minds. We're allowed to change our feelings. We're allowed to make these shifts and it be okay. And something that I would love to share so much is that when you're able to have those uncomfortable conversations with the people in your life, the people, especially the people who are closest to you, whether it's a spouse or a child or a family member, when you're okay with being uncomfortable in a conversation, you build connection and trust, and this deep love and respect for those people, right? And it's a two-way street, right? When you're willing to just share what's on your heart, whether it's a positive thing or a negative thing, you're opening up the space to take your relationship further and to take it deeper. So I really just wanted to add that piece about connecting, right? Communicating, even when it's uncomfortable, and even especially when it's uncomfortable.
Well, and the more we practice it, the better it gets, because I know for me, I didn't speak up because I always thought it was gonna, I was terrified of conflict. So I wouldn't bring it up. Well, it leads to conflict if you don't speak up because of the feelings that you're holding in and not sharing, and the connection. And it gets easier, like Shanda was saying, easier and easier to have those conversations, and to realize not assume how the conversations will go, because you have no idea. Some people enjoy doing stuff that you don't know they do. You'll be like, what? um like, I've always been, the reason I brought up like housework and stuff is I've always been that person, because that's what I thought I was supposed to do. And I would, my boyfriend, when he would go clean and do something nice so that I didn't have to do it, and I never shared that it was frustrating, I would be offended. Like, did you think I didn't do a good enough job? Because those are those doing things. Like, a good girlfriend would make sure the house is clean, was my thought. Not that I put that on anybody else, but I had that thing that this is what I have to do. These are the things I have to do to make my relationship work.
Mm,
And those were all subconscious, but it's that if you're not having those conversations, you don't know what the other person. Sometimes people like to do stuff, some people love to garden. Some people, you know, they don't they don't mind washing dishes. Other people hate washing dishes, and you never know. Or cooking. Like,
mm,
cooking, some people just love, they're passionate about it,
mm.
and like for me, it's not a chore, it's me getting to share my love with the people in my life. I love to cook and bake.
Yeah.
And just because I get to share, and it's not because it's part of the role, but I'll tell you, there are other things that were part of the role that I was raised to think was my on my to-do list that I just absolutely hate,
Yeah.
and then you learn to have those conversations and learn that it's not going to turn into a big argument. But if you don't talk about it, then you're resentful towards them, and you're like, oh,
Mm.
one more thing on my list.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And what just came up for me there was it's like changing your perspective. Okay. So I will give an example of my life too. I was raised where me and my sister, there was three of us. I had an older brother, an older sister, and then there was myself. We were raised where, my brother was the one who would cut the lawn in the summer. Right. And my sister and I did dishes. We had to do the dishes. There was no getting around it. They didn't care who washed and who dried, but we did the dishes. So I grew up hating the dishes. And when I got out on my own, I would do the dishes, but I would do them when I wanted to. I would do them mainly when I had to because there were no more dishes left. So, and that actually went through like my teenage years and even into my 20s. And I think I was like in my mid 20s to late 20s when one day I was like, hang on a minute. Why is doing the dishes such an issue? Like, what if this was a non-issue? What if this didn't have to be something that I hate doing? Because, when you turn into a responsible adult, you do your dishes daily, at least, right? Like, you kind of do them a little bit more often to keep the house clean. So I shifted my perspective and I was like, hang on a minute. What if I could use this time to just be like, hey, I'm standing here. I am so grateful that I have, my family to look after and care for. And what if doing the dishes is just all part of having that family, having that lifestyle that you have, right? So it's just a really so small and subtle shift, but it yields such big results in the way that you approach the things that you do. And this is like transferable across the board, right?
Right.
Like when I think I spoke about this last week, right? We were talking a little bit about fear and how most people stop when fear comes up. And it's like, no, 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 no. When the fear comes up, that means go. That's the green light, not the red light. Right? Because on the other side of the fear is the learning. So, for example, what if you just stuck with doing those dishes that you hate doing until eventually one day something shifts? That's the lesson, that's the learning, that's the breakthrough, right? We want to stay with that because every time we turn around and we avoid that challenge, that obstacle, that breakthrough, we're missing out on that opportunity to grow, right? Yeah.
Right. And usually they don't go away. They just compound when they're waiting. And what I do with, I don't like dishes. dishes and laundry is I just put in headphones and I listen to music, and then I'm just enjoying and not paying attention to, because it was the same thing in my childhood. You had to do. And we bring those feelings into adulthood, and like, nobody's going to control me and tell me what I have to do. So some of the resentment and stuff that comes up in our relationships have nothing to do with the person that we're with.
Yes.
That's part of that that just doing, because we're just in that mode from what we've learned, and we're in the mode of these are the things that have to be done, and we're projecting the emotions that are from where that comes from, which is not our spouse, our kids, you know, the people in our lives. Like, we're just bringing that in. We're bringing in the old emotions, like you're saying, and we're as far as going, if we don't step into the next thing, it's going to stay back there and just swirl, and all those emotions that we've been holding on to for all those years are going to keep swirling. And then when we finally do it, it's that much harder,
Oh yeah.
because we just kept pushing it off, because we're afraid of that new thing, and our subconscious mind does tell us to stay in routine. But when we step out of that, such beautiful things can happen.
I just had the most beautiful visual for everybody listening and watching. I am very visual, so I will usually share many of the beautiful pictures that get created in my mind, and hopefully you enjoy them too. But as Carla was describing that, what I could picture was this woman walking in the sand, but dragging anchors behind her. And every single time we choose not to face something and deal with something and be honest with ourselves, we add another anchor, we add more weight. And then what happens is that trek gets harder and harder and harder. And it's like, what if we could just let go of all of that, right? It's like, what if we could create a clean slate, right? We're brought up and we're raised in family dynamics, but when we move out on our own, we don't have to maintain that, right? We can transform that. We can create whatever it is that we want to create. So all of those weights that are from the past, they could just stay there, right? But you have to deal with them. That's the only way to unhook, is to turn around, face it, and meet it head on to get through it, right? Either the only way through is through, or the only way out is through, right? So one of the ways, we were just talking about communicating a few moments ago, and it brought up something that would be probably fun for you guys to do if you haven't done yet, is to learn your love language. I love that quiz so much. And I like to share it with anytime it comes up. So go learn your love language, because when you learn how you show your love, right? And when you learn the people who are close to you in your life, whether it's a spouse again, or a child or a family member, when you learn what their love language is, things begin to make a lot more sense and get a lot more clear. And you'll start to understand, for example, my partner really enjoys acts of service. That's what he does. That's one of the ways that he shows his love. So he does all of these things to support me, right? And I know that he appreciates hearing the thank you, right? So I do that. I tell him, I verbalize it, right? And it just works so beautifully, because it creates this ebb and flow of, I don't even want to say give take, but just this ebb and flow of being in a relationship with somebody, whether it's a romantic relationship or a familiar relationship, whatever it is, right?
And the Five Love Languages by Dr. Gary Chapman, amazing book.
Yes.
And understanding somebody else's love language and your own keeps you from, that's one of those things where you do, because you are doing something for somebody else, that to show them that you love them, and that's not even their love language. So you can just wear yourself out. You can wear yourself out doing and doing and doing. Mine's quality time. So one of my kids came to me, she in a communications class in college, and I had read it a long time ago, but I never talked to my kids about it. My kid goes, "Oh my gosh, mom, your love language is quality time." And I had never talked to her about it, because, I wasn't sure that they would understand or be part of it. Well, hers is gifts. And so she never got, because she went off and she's my adventurer. She lived in a different state and all that stuff. As soon as she was 18, she was out exploring the world, and gifts was hers. So when she'd come home, I would never, because it's my love language, besides that I wouldn't guilt anybody, but I would never say, you are not spending time with me, even though, like, ooh, for me, it was like, I need that time, that quality time, such a big deal to me. And hers was gifts. And then she read that book and she was like, oh my gosh, mom. And I said, what? And she goes, I don't spend very much time with you. And I said, I know you have a lot on your plate when you come home, and I'm not going to hold that against you. But she's like, but that's how you feel loved. And I said, it is, sweetheart. And now you know, and use it how you want. But it's understanding, because like you're saying, acts of service. If you're not acts of service, you're not going to know that somebody needs you to do things for them, to show them that you care about them. Because other people, you'll do stuff for them and they'll be like, okay. And you've burned, if that's yours and you've done all these things for somebody who, physical touch or gifts are theirs, then they're like, you don't love me because you're not doing their thing. And
Exactly.
that's part of that doing. You're so stuck in your list that you don't necessarily know how the other person works, because we're all different. We're all beautifully unique.
Yes. Okay. I love this so much. And it's what's coming up for me is reciprocating. Okay. Oftentimes, we do not have the same love languages. The people that live in the same house typically do not have the same love languages, which is interesting. So when we start to look for the reciprocation, meaning, well, I do all these things for you, but you do nothing for me, that is when we are then setting expectations. And when we set expectations, you can expect to be upset, right?
Yes.
Like you're going to get upset. So it's like, what if, again, this comes back to the being versus the doing. What if, however we show our love, this depending on whatever our love language is, what if we do it because that's how we show our love, and we want to show the people in our lives that we love them, and love does not need to be reciprocated, right? Love just is. It can stand on its own. And it's one of those things where I have this big belief where when we feel like we lack something, whatever that thing is, it's our calling to go create it. So if in our family dynamic, we feel like there's not as much love as we would like to see or feel or experience, that's your invitation to create it with your family, not to sit back and wait for it to happen or hope that it happens or be upset about it. It's like, no, go be proactive and make it happen.
Right. And we can't expect for our needs to be met in a relationship if we don't communicate about it, right? If we think that if we do, then somebody else is going to figure out what we need, that's not possible in any way, shape, or form. And one of the first things in my relationship that my boyfriend said to me is, don't guess what I'm thinking, because most of the time I'm not. And it's true. We as women can be like thinking, and then we're wondering what they're thinking and all that stuff. And that was such an important thing for him to say to me. And it was out of the blue. I have no idea why he said it, but he knew from the beginning to establish for me not to guess what he's thinking. And he said, and I can't guess what you're thinking.
Yeah.
I can't read your mind. I can't guess what you need. You have to communicate with me what you need.
Yeah.
And, which is profound, because I would do the things and think that my partner knew what I needed. I've done all this for you. You should do this, this, and this for me. Right.
Yes.
And that's part of that doing. Like you're so busy doing. Why are you doing? What is your intention behind it? Are you doing it for somebody to love you more, to, whatever it is? Somebody else can't know your intention unless you tell them,
100%.
unless you communicate it,
Yeah.
and to come back to yourself and be like, what is my intention in doing this? Why am I doing these things? Is it to have peace, joy, love flow in my life? Or is it to have somebody else do something, or because I think somebody expects it of me?
Yeah.
There's so much under the doing that if you really just stop and connect with yourself and like ask yourself, they can be hard questions, like, because we can be so judgy of ourselves. So let's not ask a question because then I'm going to see something I don't like about myself. Okay. But then it. Then you're like, okay, well, why do I feel this way? Why do I think this way? What's underneath it all? Right.
Yeah.
And so it's just for relationships, it's so important to know, why are you doing the things? What is your intention underneath it? If your intention in the morning is to have this amazing, beautiful day full of communication and connection with people, then more likely than not, that's the kind of stuff you're going to do is connected with it. Those are the kinds of things that will come into your life. But if you're like, I have to do all these things to be enough for people to accept me, for people to love me, then you're just doing it to be worthy, which you already are, by the way. Everybody, you were all born worthy. You will always be worthy, no matter what you've done, because we've all made mistakes. And if anybody thinks that they're perfect, I'm sorry to be the one to tell you, none of us are. But we are born worthy. And then, so if the doing, like, Shanda and I are talking about doing, but I found that I was doing to be loved, to make the things happen in my life without really paying attention to what my intention for my
Mhm.
life was, my intention for my day was.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that the guessing versus asking piece, right? Like expecting people to be able to read between the lines. First of all, most of the time we don't even know what's going on in our own head, let alone asking somebody else to decipher that for us, right? So, when we're guessing how somebody's feeling or what their intention is, we're operating from a place of fear, right? Because what's happening is we are not willing to get vulnerable and intimate by asking. We're guessing. We're like, no, I don't want to ask. Who knows what would happen? That's going to be uncomfortable. I'll just guess instead. And that just comes from a place of fear, right? So again, it's like if you have a thought or you have if the word should pops up anywhere revolving around any of this, if it pops up anywhere, well, they should know, or I should do this, or whatever it is, stop. That's like your red flag. Okay. I heard somebody say this before and I think it's hilarious. Stop shoulding all over yourself. Okay. And other people, because let's just get real and get vulnerable, right? And start asking clarifying questions so that we can truly and honestly understand the people that we are deciding and choosing to share our life with, right? I mean, if you look at your relationship now, pick any one and rate it on a scale from 0 to 10. Where is it? And let's just imagine for a moment that you would start asking those questions that pop up in your mind, but then you get too afraid for whatever reason and you withhold those questions. Every time you withhold one of those questions or one of those actions that you want to take, again, all you're doing is shutting yourself off from experiencing life to its fullest, right? So it's a disservice to yourself. It's a disservice to everybody in your life because they're also missing out on the best version of you, on your highest version, on your healthiest, happiest version. So let's agree from here on out to stop cutting ourselves off and just start living life with fear, with vulnerability, with connection and intimacy, and just, go forth and build an amazing life that we know we're capable of creating. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Beautifully said.
So I don't know, like what's coming up for you, Carla? What is like, what's the message or the theme from today that you kind of really want to hit home for the audience?
Well, when when we get so busy doing, we're just in survival mode, right? Like you were saying, like we don't create this life we love. We don't create these truly connected relationships with the people we love. We because we are not also not connected with ourselves, because you really to have everything you want, you have to connect to yourself and connect to others. You have to, okay, why am I afraid of this? Okay, this is why. Okay, do I want this to control my life? No, I don't. Is this where I want to stay for the rest of my life? No, I don't. You know, and sometimes it takes something profound. For me, it was like no matter how much I had on the self-help or the fact that I have a degree in psychology or any of that, was physical. This stuff comes out physically, by the way, guys. The more that you are in that survival mode, that to do holding in resentment, holding in everything and not having that, okay, conversations, connection, really just sharing who you are and finding out who you are, you're holding all that stuff in and it comes out physically.
Mm.
You know, it comes out, mine came out in rheumatoid arthritis. It's really a big deal, because when you're doing what Shanda was saying, when you're just being in this one space and you're not stepping out of that comfort zone, and believe me, I understand that it can be difficult, it can be scary, but I also can tell you on the other side of it, wow, it's just incredible. And you just end up repeating until you make those steps, until you step through fear. You make the same, you can pick somebody different, have a different relationship, cut people out of your life, but until it's all starts with you, until you make those changes, you repeat, repeat, repeat. It doesn't matter who you bring in. You repeat the same friendships, you repeat the same um, partner relationships. And it's the same thing. So it gets to start with you to get you out of that survival into having the most fulfilling, joyful life that you can. Bringing in the beautiful you that is underneath all of the things that didn't serve you up until now.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you're talking about energy, right? Energy is everything and everything is energy. So if we think of it like this, guys, where like, let's pretend we're like a beaker or a glass. If everything is energy in and out, if we're constantly repressing or suppressing emotions and cutting off and not allowing for things, we're just stacking all of that negative energy inside, inside,
Yeah.
inside. And what are you doing that is positive to level that out, right? There has to be a balance, or all you're having come in is a bunch of negative, heavy things, which, like Carla was saying, results in physical ailments in your body. I, for one, as well as Carla, have an autoimmune disease, right? And I've done this in many of my trainings. I've taken a poll and I've asked people who have come to these healing retreats or healing experiences, who here has some sort of physical ailment, and it's astonishing what people bring. It's like it's almost everybody every single time, which is crazy, and it's all stored energy. Okay, so we get to start releasing that, right? And coming back to the surviving, right? You were like, when we act this way, when this is the way that we're showing up in the world, we're operating from a place of survival, and 100%. And I believe that in order to shift out of survival and into thriving, it's allowing yourself to understand that it is not about being ready. Being ready is the myth. I'm busting it right now. Pop, there, it's gone. Okay. It is not about being ready for something. It's about being willing. Okay. I'm willing to try. I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to put myself out there. I'm willing to be uncomfortable, whatever it is. Swap that out. We don't need to be ready, because if you're waiting to be ready, we'll take a lifetime to get ready to be ready, right?
Yes.
It's like never ending. Oh, I'm not ready yet. Well, I need the one more thing. I need to do this one more thing, or this has to happen first. Stop it. Just be open to being willing. That's it.
Right. Right. And whatever your path is, there's no right or wrong how long it takes. It is really about being willing to take it and to grab little things and find what is working for me to get me out of this space that is not where I want to spend my life. You know,
Yeah.
who wants to look back at their life, and I'm sure all of us have at moments and think, wow, wow, this is what I've chosen.
Yeah.
This is not what I want. And it will be that way until we choose differently, until we're willing to make things different. And it is uncomfortable, but I'll tell you, the longer you wait, you're just adding to the uncomfortability because you have that we add excuses in. Well, when this happens, when that happens, when that happens, eh, we always have excuses if we choose to have excuses. But when we're willing to just do it and be like, okay, because we our subconscious mind will filter out stuff. And so when we're like, well, I can't until this, I can't until that, the only information we're going to get is what backs up that,
Right.
what backs that up. So like what Shanda's saying, you have to be willing
Yeah.
and to not judge yourself on how long it's been or how quickly or slowly your journey is. It's really about taking that step and just being willing to make those changes in your life that create the life that you really want, the thriving life, and not the surviving and being like, oh,
Mm,
can I get through today?
yeah. Yes. Um, okay. If talking about being willing, let's just even start by being willing to be curious. Curiosity is the one of the best operating systems to come from. As long as we are curious, we always have an open mind. We're always open to trying new things or learning new things and having new experiences. It's inviting, it's encouraging, right? It's expansive. So let's be willing to be curious and start asking questions like, what if, right? And not even like why, but how, right? Asking deeper questions. And like Carla was saying earlier about patterns, honor your journey. Your journey is yours and yours alone. And it doesn't matter how long it takes you or where you end up. None of that matters, right? What matters is that we learn those lessons along the way that we're meant to learn. And if you're like, I have no idea what that means, look for the patterns in your life. Those patterns are the clues, the breadcrumbs to lead you to the lessons. So if you see a pattern in your life, ask yourself, I'm curious. What is the lesson that wants to be learned here? Right? And that is a really, really great place to start by asking those questions. Yeah.
Right, right. And the lessons that are there, until you learn them, they'll keep popping up.
Right.
So if you keep seeing these things pop up in your life and you're like, why does this keep happening to me? Step into, okay, what is a lesson that I can learn from this? Dig deeper, because it is really easy to say, why do these things keep happening to me?
Yeah. So,
Um,
yeah, when you do that, what's happening is you're putting the responsibility of your experience, your life, in somebody else's hands. You are giving your power away. You're saying, my life is like this because of these external things. And what we need to understand, what we really get to shift, is that all of the time we are responsible for our life, all of the time.
right.
We are responsible for creating the change that we want to see. If there is something out in the world that is uncomfortable to you, that you have a very strong reaction to, again, it's an invitation to look inward on where you might be out of alignment with that exact same thing, right? Tap into personal integrity. And it comes down to, again, a willingness to be vulnerable and be curious and just be open, right? When people give you feedback, when you receive feedback, which by the way, everything in the world is feedback, right? Everything, which is really cool. Be open to receiving it and actually listen to it, right?
Yeah.
What if we could look at everything that happens to us as feedback on the choices we're making or what we're creating, what we're generating. Like, what's my part in this?
Right. Exactly. Instead of doing things like this has happened to me, or the other thing is just not feel your emotion. By the way, you get to feel your emotions and let them pass through. This is not about sucking it up, trudging through it and getting past it, because that also, it will continue to happen. But until you do exactly what Shanda's saying, I mean, you have to be like, this is feedback. What is this feedback about? What is there something that I'm doing in my life that is giving me something I really don't want, that really doesn't feel good to me, doesn't feel right? It's definitely not aligned with what I want to have in my life, right? What is that? And we do these patterns, and then we, our family members taught us these patterns. I taught my kids patterns, and I'll tell you, sometimes my biggest teachers are my kids, because I will see them do something like, oh my gosh, I taught them that. And like we talked about, last week, I apologize to them as soon as I see it. Why? Because it's a pattern I passed on to them, not to tell them what they have to do, but to share with them, hey, I was wrong. This is how I handled it. This is how I showed you to handle it. If they get to look at how they want to handle stuff. This is not about control, but we have to see exactly, are we letting everything continually say it's happening to me? This is happening to me, which is the doing stuff that we're talking about. Like, if you're doing all these things and saying, my life is miserable, I'm so unhappy, all of this stuff, then you're not taking the responsibility for what's happening in your life. You are the to-do list. When you're doing, it can be never ending, and you're just allowing life to happen as you're checking off the list, and not taking responsibility for, and it's hard, man, it's hard to take responsibility and say, why would I choose for my life to be that way? We wouldn't consciously say, hey, please let me be miserable and unhappy.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's interesting because I feel like one of the reasons why we take on all of these things is because we feel like the amount of things we do, what we do defines who we are. It's not
Mhm.
what we do that defines who we are, it's who we're being that defines who we are. And there's two pieces here that I want to say. The first piece is I was in a training a few years ago, and I thought this was a really beautiful way to think of who you want to be. Okay, this is perfect because this is exactly what we're talking about. Who do you want to be? When the day comes, which is inevitable, we're all going to pass on. And when that day comes, what do you want your epitaph? I think that's what that's called, right? On your tombstone. What do you want that to say? How will that reflect you? It's not going to say this person had all these to-dos and they always check them off every single day. They did all the things on the list. Hopefully, it's not what that's going to say.
Right.
Right. But it might be like, this person was a loving, caring, kind, generous person. Those are the ways of being that you're being called to step into. Whatever those qualities are, those are the ones that you get to start aligning for your life. Bring them in and start living through those. Right. And the second piece that I wanted to mention was this whole process is about being judgment free. We are not judging ourselves and we're not judging other people. We're doing the opposite. We're trying to accept and connect, right? So when you go through any of the exercises or use the tools, or even maybe have a huge aha moment, like Carla said, for example, she sees sometimes that some of the things that she's passed on to her children. Same here. Don't judge yourself about doing that. We don't know what we don't know until we know it. And once we know it, we can then transform it. So
Right.
we always come from a place of love and never from a place of judgment, because I will tell you, up until I started doing this work, I went through my life trying to hate myself better, trying to hate myself healthy, trying to hate myself successful. Guess what? Never works, and
Yep.
it never lasts. You get to be willing to love yourself through the process, right? The more love and space you can create for yourself, the judgment can't, first of all, judgment cannot live there in that space of love, the more that you will heal and you will grow. So I wanted to really drive that last piece home with judgment, because I feel like that is usually the first thing that comes up when we start to do this, right? We put up all those messy pieces on the table and we see them and they're uncomfortable. And then we start to judge ourselves. We don't do that. We get to be okay with however messy we are, right? And we just get to work at scrubbing some pieces up, and understand and know that there will always be messes within ourselves. We're never going to be completely perfect or completely fault free. We make mistakes. We always will make mistakes. And it's about what lessons you learn in between the mistakes and how long it takes you to kind of bounce back from them. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's truly about loving yourself, right? You can't love somebody else until you learn to love yourself.
Yeah.
And as you, like Shanda's saying, as you learn, these are the parts of me, and not being so critical. And that's hard. Like, it's so hard to not be critical of yourself, and just be like, okay, I learned this from that, and I get to love me through all these lessons that I've been through. And it's okay that I made this choice. It's okay that I made that choice,
Yes.
and it's so beautiful when you end up looking at it and like see how you've evolved as you stop criticizing yourself and you start loving yourself while you're learning, just the changes that happen. And you see, like, if you look back at yesterday and look at today, and then after you've learned some stuff, you're like, wow, I feel so different. I feel so much freer. The anxiety and all this stuff, when you learn to do exactly what Shanda was saying, and you learn to love yourself through it all, you learn to accept that things are messy for every single person. It doesn't matter. And I don't care what any media or anything else said that this is how you are. Every one of us makes choices that we're like, later we're like, oh my gosh, why did I choose that? And just understanding that where you came from made you make a choice, but that doesn't mean that you're a bad person or to be angry with yourself or criticize yourself, but to say, okay, what was underneath that? What kind of pain or anger or whatever or thing did I allow to guide me into something that is not what I would want now that I see it? And then heal that part of you without saying, oh my gosh, I'm such a horrible person because I did this, because then we hide parts of ourselves from the people we love as well as ourselves, because we don't accept all of the pieces of us. And that's the beauty in loving yourself and accepting yourself for who you are as you go through the process, and finding the wholeness that you are meant to be.
Yeah. It's that coming home again, right? It's like, I'm so glad that you said the sentence that they're the two words that I wrote them down actually, and then you said them. It's okay. Okay. So even when the judgment comes up, because it's going to, again, this is not about perfection, judgment will come up. And when it does, all you get to do is simply say, and it's okay. You could say, oh, I can't believe I did that. And it's okay. Right. So it's softening that blow. And over time, your language will start to shift. Your thoughts will start to shift. And then the way you show up, the way that you're being will also shift. It's definitely a complete circle. And it all starts from love.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Absolutely. Is there any more that was coming up for you?
No, that last piece there, I just really wanted to share around, how to kind of combat or soften. I don't even like the word combat, but soften the blow of judgment. And, we all do the best we can with what we have, always.
Absolutely.
Okay, no matter where you are, no matter where you've been or what you've been through, you do the best with what you have, and so do the people in your life. So think of the people that we like to try and place blame on. They've done the best with what they had at that time. And we're either everything that we do, every action that we take is either coming from a place of love or coming from a place of desiring love.
Right.
Right. And so when you can really, something that helped me, this will be the last thing that I'll add to this conversation today, because clearly you and I could keep going on about this, which is
Oh,
beautiful.
yes, forever.
But the last thing that I will add before I complete will be that one of the most supportive things that I have been able to do to allow more compassion and room for other people, no matter who they are, no matter what they've done, right, is to look at every single person like a child,
Yes.
right? Strip it all down and like see them as that 5-year-old kid. And it doesn't even matter if you're like, well, I don't know anything about, it doesn't matter. Pretend, imagine it, and pretend they're 5 years old. And then how would you approach the situation from that point? Because sometimes we forget how we're all so similar, right? We're
Yes.
all so similar. We're all so connected. We all came from the same seed, right? And we allow life situations and circumstances to kind of pull us apart and divide us. And I just believe that when you can take that lens off and put on that lens of compassion and acceptance and love, it changes everything. So give that a try. Let us know how that works out, by the way. Let us know in the comments if this is something that you're willing to try. Not ready, just willing. And always giving us your feedback in the comments below. Thank you guys very much. It's been a pleasure.
Yes. Thank you. And I do the same thing, Shanda. I do the, like, somebody told me in a training once, think of them as a wounded little child. Reactive people are go back to those spots. So that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I do really encourage you guys to think of that think of somebody as, sometimes it made me laugh when I first started doing it, because I really looked at somebody and thought, oh my gosh, they're reacting from this place of where they've been injured as a child. They're in that child space. And also looking at myself, which changed my way of reacting, because I was coming from that same spot, like she was saying, like really like thinking about and accepting it. So yes, comment about it, try it out, be willing to try it out and just see where it takes you. And it has been so wonderful talking with you today, Shanda, and having this conversation to share with you all. And like she said, some of the stuff we could go on forever. So ask questions. We're happy to have conversations with you, and because we're excited to share all of this with you. Like, we are doing all of this because we want to share, we want to be of service, and we want to make a difference in your lives. And so this is super exciting. And I just want to say thank you for tuning in to our channel, From Head to Heart and Home, with Carla and Shanda. Like, it's such a pleasure. If you enjoyed our conversation, make sure you click on the subscribe button so you get all the notifications. And be sure to join us next week for another authentic, connected conversation. Yes, bye for now, everyone.
Bye.